Search not my outfit.
It's Death by Monsters.
Hello and welcome to Death by Monsters, the show all about monsters, mysteries, and the unknown. A podcast that's been described by one reviewer as not as good as it used to be. If only it was like how it used to be, when it used to be exactly the same as it is now almost. With me, as always, are my partners in crime. That's foreshadowing.
Boom.
It's Nick Quick Fingers Murphy.
Ooh.
With a sexual overtone.
I know, right?
I would say I have heard about those quick fingers, though
You know?
never experienced them myself, I'll say.
They get the job done, let me tell you. And Paula Deming, or as she's known, the cheese thief of the San Fernando Valley.
Oh, that's right.
That checks out.
And I'm Matthew Jude, who just frankly can't be trusted.
Yeah.
Also true. I do know that one from personal experience, so.
I will steal it if it's not bolted down. The concept of cool is subjective and amorphous, like self-worth or a very viscous ectoplasmic residue.
Oh.
Yeah.
Many of the things that I find cool, someone else might not. It's part of what makes life a rich tapestry.
Like D.B. Cooper.
Yep. Because he's awesome.
It makes this pointless existence almost tolerable, but the one thing that is always cool 100% of the time, no exceptions, is heists, and to a lesser extent, hijinks and capers.
I do like a good caper.
Yeah.
I think a caper goes above a hijink, I'll say it.
Well, I think so too, because they're also food.
I don't really like capers, though. That's the thing.
They're right in the right context. No one's just eating a spoonful of capers. I feel like that's
No.
bizarre.
No. I mean, let's be honest. Someone is, but...
If you are eating just a spoonful of capers, please send that home strange into podcast@gmail.com. I very much want to be involved in a heist. One where I manage to maintain the moral high ground, like stealing the cure for male pattern baldness from an evil pharmaceutical company, or maybe freeing a whale.
Yeah, that's the thing about the heist is what is nice. It's like they can be inherently bad, like you're stealing money. But they also could be like, no, you're going there to, like, free this whale.
Yeah. You want a Robin Hood heist, you know?
You want to make out with, like, financially as a gain, though, I feel.
Oh, sorry, I don't know where my brain went, but I was like, who are we making out with? So that's where I'm at.
You were just thinking about that animated Robin Hood. That's what you were thinking about.
You're right, I was.
Accurate.
But this week's story is all about probably the most notorious art heist in history and the world's largest ever value theft of property. Though instead of high ground, this goes deep into the dark underbelly of organized Boston crime syndicates.
That's interesting. I guess it is worth, I think, what is like $500 million that was stolen, right? Sorry, spoilers.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, stealing $500 million of money or like jewels would be hard. But you could sell, like the most expensive painting ever sold was $450 million, which means you could technically steal one painting.
Well, here's the thing. Art is only worth the value we as a society assign to it, just like diamonds.
But so is money.
So really, is any of this worth anything at all?
I will argue yes, strongly. And I will also say that art theft, on average, is a $7 billion a year trade.
Really?
Man, sounds like I need to get into a different line of business.
Seriously, though.
Heists, let me tell you.
Art theft, here I come. You know, it's good to diversify.
You've got to diversify the portfolio. And I think if you can get a Renoir, a Da Vinci.
Here's the thing, too. Also, like, as an artist, steal some of my art. Because I'm guaranteeing if we find it, the value of that's only going up.
That actually is coming up.
Oh, is that right? I was about to say, I was like, dude, a Picasso that's been previously stolen will definitely go up.
The value of art goes up if that art is missing.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing is, even though this does involve what I can only describe as terrible, terrible criminals, it is also, I can't help but think, really pretty bloody cool. Because this is the story of the Gardner Heist. Also, it turns out that most heists are done instead of cool criminal capers, done by bumbling fucking idiots.
Yeah.
Well, most criminals, I think, are not masterminds.
It's just, sometimes you hear about a heist and they're always on the news. It's like masterfully heist. And really what's actually happened is someone's run and snatched and grabbed a painting. And it's like, that's not necessarily a masterful plan.
Yeah, that's not a heist.
They're like, they scoped out the building like a week before. I'm like, that's like bare minimum you could do of doing a heist. Like,
Yeah.
Unless, I mean, the only thing you can do less than that is just like quickly popping on Google Earth to try and
Yeah, seriously though.
look at a street view.
Or just showing up day of, being like, we don't know the layout of this building, but we're going to take it.
What are you doing over there on your computer? Oh, I'm just casing a joint.
I have always wanted to case a joint of some description.
Well, yeah.
The Gardner Museum in Boston, tucked between Harvard University and Fenway Park, was founded
Wow.
in 1903 by Isabella Stewart Gardner. It's real swanky looking, and it's home to what could be called, by someone as working class as I am, a bunch of fancy art stuff.
How does it compare to the Getty collection, though?
It's not quite the Getty's collection.
Or the Broad. The Broad's a pretty massive collection.
It's really cool because this is we're going to get into it, but I really want to go to the Gardner Museum. I would really love to go there because it just looks real nice, and it's in a nice part of Boston.
It looks nice.
As somewhat of a backstory to Isabella Gardner, she was born in 1840 and was, as can be expected by someone who's known to history as being an art collector, socialite, and philanthropist, just a little bit eccentric.
Yeah.
Also, clearly old money.
Yeah.
I feel like she's got to be, right?
I honestly think, as a person doing research on her as a person, she sounds like she was probably really cool, but she was also really, really into art. While not bad off by any means, she married into the Peabody family by way of John Lowell Gardner Jr., the grandson of Joseph Peabody, who got very extremely and filthily rich, trading pepper in from Sumatra. And I, for some reason, got very invested in finding out if he was related to Joseph Peabody of the Peabody Award.
Yeah.
I think they are, but I couldn't find the actual link. I got very lost in the morass of rabbit holes of Ancestry.com, which I always end up doing. And I spent, honest to God, like I was looking at 1700s privateers by the time I realised I'd gone way down far what was essentially a pointless dead end. To be clear, I spent 3 hours on Ancestry.com.
Matthew. So I was forced to write this paragraph about it so that my 3 hours didn't feel wasted.
Exactly.
Honestly, Ancestry.com is like cocaine to me. I just can't get enough. I go down all these rabbit holes. I love it. Basically, this Joseph Peabody, where Lowell Gardner gets his money from, he was massive. He is like the most wealthy trader in Salem in the 1700s. He made old money going to China, part of the China trade and all that kind of stuff. So old, very wealthy. After what can be described as a series of tragedies involving the loss of a child and a subsequent miscarriage, Isabella was prescribed by a doctor to go a-traveling.
Just eat, pray, love your way through this.
That's right.
Back, but the olden time version.
Yeah.
I know you're sad, but what you do know is you can still feel.
Yeah.
Gross. I actually relate to this a little bit because I remember once, this is true story, I went to a doctor because of my own broken fucking brain. And this doctor told me, she said, and her literal words were, "Why don't you just go get a girlfriend?"
What?
And I said, "Goodbye, doctor."
That's what a medical professional said to you?
Yeah.
Thanks.
That is bullshit. I can't even believe it.
I did go on to quickly diagnose her profession as a whole as I left.
Wow.
So a-traveling she went, which seemed to do the trick. She came back a year later, became the eccentric socialite she would be remembered as, made friends with a bunch of famous artists, like she was painted by John Singer Sargent, among others.
Cool.
And she opened her museum before dying in 1924. It's in her will that an endowment of $1 million was left to the museum, on the stipulation that her collection was not to be altered. And unaltered it remained, by and large, until March 18th, 1990, when 13 works of art were stolen in both the largest theft of property ever, as well as the longest art heist of all time, taking 81 minutes.
81 minutes.
81 minutes is what the film should be called.
That's what I was going to say. Is one of the documentaries about this called 81 Minutes?
Yeah.
The Gardner Heist story.
That might be what this episode ends up being called.
Oh.
Unless I say something particularly hilarious.
Well, Nick or I could say something hilarious.
And while some believe the perpetrators of the theft itself may have been discovered, which though that's still widely up for debate, the location of the artwork itself remains a mystery. Also, for context, most art heists take 9 minutes.
9 minutes. Wait, where did they get that statistic from? How do they know an art heist typically takes 9 minutes?
So I watched quite a few lectures by Anthony Moore, who is the now security head at the Gardner Museum. He's fascinating. He did a really good lecture on art heists for a book he wrote about art heists in general. And he's literally collated 1,500 art heists.
Wow.
Every Rembrandt that's ever went missing, he's investigated and got all the details for it. So there's about 12 people in the world who are experts at art heists, as in the detection of art heists and working out what happened.
Well, now they just need to turn into an art heistist because now they know the best way to do it. They know how to get around the security. You know, they need to start playing for the other team, if you will. That's what that phrase.
It's like when you hire the ex-criminal to help you, right?
Yeah, but the other way around.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point. What I found really interesting was, in one of his lectures that I listened to, he made very clear that even though there's only 12 people, technically in his field, his profession, he made a point to say that they were not all friends.
It's like, no, we don't all hang out together. We don't like talking to each other. Stop asking me about it.
We don't like the same kind of art. I'm post-impressionist.
Well, it's because they all have different opinions on what happened. But the thing is, Boston is an epicenter for art crime, and for reasons we will go into. But man, nail it down. And even if you nail it down, they will remove it, because some of these art pieces were also pretty much nailed down. So I realised this is in the mystery campground of the Death by Monsters holiday retreat. It isn't the most spooky story out there.
No.
So I'm trying to solidify and cement my new Stay Spooky catchphrase.
Well, I'm not convinced that Stay Spooky is going to be a catchphrase. And if you're a patron, you can go over to our Patreon, patreon.com/deathbymonsters, because I am putting this up for a vote.
If you put this up for a vote, I want you to, if you vote against it, I'll need you to come up with something better to back up your negative comment.
Well,
Fair.
I just think we've been doing the podcast for a year. We haven't needed a sign-off catchphrase yet.
But think of the merge possibilities, Paula.
Well,
So I'm going to be adding in some spooky stories throughout the show to hopefully
gosh.
creep people out every now and again while I talk about art. So I've done some internet scouring for spooky stories, spooky true stories as they were all referred to, but no one put any references in the footnotes, let me tell you. But there's this guy had a 5-year-old child who would have bad dreams, so would call out for him in the night. He'd call out for his father. Then one night, this guy woke up because he'd heard his son calling out for him, but he was calling him by name, not saying dad. So he went to his kid's room and found him sleeping. He woke him up and said, "Hey, you were calling me, is everything okay?" And the kid said, "Dad, when they call you, you're not supposed to answer."
ew, I hate it. I want to know about art.
Stay spooky.
Stay spooky! So, it's 1 a.m. The night of St. Patrick's Day in Boston. So my guess is pretty fucking rowdy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
probably.
probably.
Yes. Probably yes.
Boston, Paddy's Day, you know they get into
Yeah,
it.
there's a lot of Irish people in Boston, right?
Yes, massive Irish population.
On security that night was a guy called Rick Abbott, who was 23, and Randy Heston, who was 25. Now, I mention this mainly because I know just how good a security guard in a creepy and quiet museum I'd be at age 23 or 25. And the only word I could come up to describe that was lackadaisical.
Yeah, to say the
Yeah,
least.
really, one could see this as a failure of management.
Yeah.
I would say
I'm
so.
going to go with most of the times asleep.
Not only that, but while Rick had been there a while, this was Randy's first time working the night shift. And just in case anyone is imagining the characters Rick and Randy from the Trailer Park Boys, you aren't far off. Not to belittle or demean them, but they look like they're the kind of people who would follow the Dave Matthews Band around America.
Yeah.
Or work out a preposterous scheme to not have their entire frat kicked out of a college. So, 2 police officers sat outside the side entrance of the Gardner for a while in a hatchback. This was witnessed by some passerbys. These 2 police officers come up to the side entrance of the museum and knock on the door, unlike today where they would simply tear gas the door for obstruction. That's right, I'm getting political with it.
That's right.
Oh,
Good.
it's so true.
The security protocol was that one guard sat at the security desk while the other guard patrolled the galleries with nothing but a flashlight, a walkie-talkie, and his goddamn wits, gumption, and possibly snacks, I'd imagine.
Probably a couple.
Yeah, maybe those snacks were edibles. I'll say it.
They were of the baked goods variety.
You want to see some baked goods? Well, just look right here.
The thing is, right, as well, is that if there's only 2 people in the whole building, because before, actually, Isabella Gardner used to live on the 4th floor, but it was only after the person who lived there stopped living there that the heist took place. So it might be part of the fact, it might be part of the reason why they decided to hit the museum is because like in Britain, you can't get a landlord's license, like as a free house, like as a freehold publican, without having someone living on premises. Like
That's
the landlord someone has to live there. But most pubs don't have that. But they have like a bed upstairs, and it's like, well, someone lives here. No one lives there. But it's really it's really good idea because for security reasons, it's good to have someone at a pub all night because pubs they're just very easy to break into because they're just full of doors. The whole point of a pub is to be to be easy to get in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, the thing is, I just think walking around a creepy museum on your own at night.
Oh, I'd love it.
It sounds awful.
I think it would be pretty spooky working in a museum night shift, walking around.
Yeah.
Because I've seen too many episodes of X-Files where weird stuff's happened because something's cursed. It's just, I would freak myself out constantly roaming around a museum at night.
Especially if you were in a natural history museum.
Or just in the sculpture garden or something like that, where there's just like
Yeah.
humanoid figures. Here's the thing, though: if a museum offered like late night, like you can go there at night, it's dark, you were just given a flashlight, and you got to like tour the
I'd
museum.
love
period,
that.
I would so do it. I think it'd be so cool, so fun. I don't think any museum would ever do it, but I think it'd be really fun to do.
There are definitely late night viewings of galleries that I've been to, but I've never been to one that's like walk around by torchlight. But that would be so cool.
Yeah.
Especially if one was like a reenactment, like a military museum, like the Imperial War Museum, where they've got like they have full on trenches remade.
Yeah.
And that'd be so cool to like walk through the trenches by flashlight and just be walking around and like I just think it'd be great.
Yeah.
The World War, is it World War I or World War II? I can't remember. I feel terrible. Museum in Kansas City has an exhibit that is, it's got to be World War I. So they have the World War I museum, and they have like a replicated trench that you can go through. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's probably World War I then, yeah.
Kansas City Star, that's what you are. Sorry, I always think anyway, I can't think of Kansas without thinking of that song. So before the police knock, Rick Abbott goes on patrol, during which the fire alarms go off in some of the rooms. Only there's no fire. So to stop it from happening again, he turns off the fire control panel. He then goes back on his rounds before stopping at the side entrance where he opens and closes the door. Once his patrol's ended, at 1 a.m., he switched out with Randy, who goes on patrol while Rick sits at the desk. At about 1:20 a.m., the 2 police who have been camped outside drive up to the side entrance and walk to the door. They ring the buzzer and Rick Abbott answers it. They tell him that they were the police and they're responding to a disturbance and wanted to be buzzed into the building. As Abbott could see them on the security cameras and they looked like police, he let them in even though there had been no disturbance, and that was totally against the museum's protocol.
Also, hasn't he seen an episode of Law & Order? Get them to show you their badge. Get them to show you their warrant. Hey, it is your right. Look, it doesn't matter what your rights are because it sounds like police do whatever
Just a note here on how to deal with the police. If the police knock on your door and tell you they have a reason to come into your house and you feel weird about it anyway, that's when you should call the police to make sure you're actually dealing with the police, is what I've written into the script.
Well, we said similar things.
So this woman got one of those sleeping apps
Oh, you're doing a spooky story now. Okay, good.
to see if she snored or not. They record all night, but save just the sounds that it detects, so you can see quickly if you're talking backwards in Latin in your sleep or screaming something, or snoring as well, I suppose. So she listens back to the recording the next morning, and all was normal, just a few sounds of her moving around until she hears the sound of the doorknob turning.
Oh my gosh, I hate this.
Then she hears the sound of the door creaking open and the distant sound of footsteps moving
Stop.
across the
I
room.
hate it.
Mm-hmm. Go on. Yeah.
I hate it so much.
That wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. The only problem is she lives alone.
I thought you were going to be like, she was in a tent. There was no door.
She's been dead for 60 years already.
This is why when I'm sleeping in the house by myself, I lock my bedroom door. I straight up do that.
I hear it. Anyway, at 1:24, the cops are let into the foyer. They walk up to the security desk and ask Abbott to go get anyone else who's working in the museum and bring them to the desks. So he gets on the walkie-talkie and calls Randy to the front. It's at this point that Rick says that he notices the taller of the cops, his moustache didn't seem real. And he also noticed that his hands look bigger than they are normally, and that time isn't real, and something about chakras, and also he needs to crash on your couch probably. My point is, Rick Abath looks like he's high all the time.
And judging by, I believe it.
The Shaw's cop then tells Rick that he looks familiar. And even worse, he thinks they might have a warrant out for his arrest, so he needs to see Rick's identification. What a nightmare! Because that's when the shorter cop pushes Rick against the wall and cuffs him.
These security guards, look, I know that they're like alive still today and stuff, and they could possibly listen to this and be offended, and I'm sure maybe they deal with guilt about what happened. I don't know, but man, these are the worst security guards in the entire world.
Well, my defense for them is that they are kids.
I honestly, I don't blame them at all. I really don't. I think myself at 23, people are like, the protocol is not to let the cops in. If I was working somewhere and presumably cops, you were taught from the moment you're born to obey police officers. Now, again, a lot of times I think we probably shouldn't, but nonetheless, it's like, again, we are taught when a cop tells you to do something, you do it. So if they say like, hey, there's a disturbance, we need to be let in, I would probably let him in, especially when I was 23.
That's fair.
Like Rick says later on that he thinks that maybe, he says, I don't know, maybe they'd had a call from a neighbor who's seen like Paddy's Day celebrations. Maybe someone had hopped the fence and was in the garden areas of the museum and stuff, and he wasn't the one that made a call. And I would, if it was me, I'd just let them in. I really probably would.
If I was 23 especially, I would do it too. I totally would.
Also, if I'm being perfectly honest, even though it's my job and stuff, if I'm that age, it's like, you aren't paying me enough to do anything exceptional.
Yeah.
Then Randy walks in and sees what's either a very sexy situation or a very bad situation, either of which are not workplace appropriate. It's then that the taller, fake, mustached cop arrests Randy. And once they're both arrested, they reveal that they weren't cops at all, and that they were on a goddamn heist, and that this was a robbery.
It's so funny to me that they are like, hey, also, now it's time to be a cliche evil villain and tell you my evil plan. It's like,
I love it.
Tie them up and then do whatever you want. You don't have to tell them anything.
I love it.
If you think I'm going on a heist or robbing a bank without shouting I don't think I could physically rob a bank without shouting, "This is a stick-up." You are crazy if I'm not saying that. And so if I'm not telling security guards that this is a robbery, how often do you get to say that? I mean, these people probably more often than most, but you can't stop me. There's no way. You wait your entire life to tell people that this is a stick-up.
The second they were incapacitated, I would gloat. I would gloat so hard. Be like, this mustache isn't real. That's what I would do.
And then the other one does it as well. And he goes, oh no, actually this mustache is real.
This was real.
The thieves then get out Randy and Rick's
dicks
wallet.
Damn it.
They check where they live and say, now we know where you live, don't tell the police anything.
That's horrifying.
Ooh, that's smart.
And you'll get a reward in about a year.
Oh, okay. Well, now I'm going to get a reward. Did they get the reward?
I do not think they ever got a reward.
Damn it. Coupons to the local grocer.
Coupons to CC's Pizza. I mean, I'm happy about it, but it's only like $5.
It's just one of those coupon books. Do you ever sell those for like fundraisers? Coupon books that you're like, I would never actually use anything in here. There's like 100 businesses with coupons in this book, and I will never use a single one of them.
Yeah. Accurate.
So this is the situation. We now have two heisters, which isn't a word, with free roam in the museum as it's 1:30 in the morning. No one knows they are there, the police aren't coming, and the security guards are tied up in the basement. So while most heists are fast-paced capers filled with wires, infrared security laser gymnastic-based montages, and sexy music, this one is more of a casual walk around a museum, making the most of the 5-finger discount now on offer.
Yeah.
But there were some motion detectors in each room, so we know pretty much every move that was made. But the security tape, which was a VHS tape, was stolen as they left. What a time to be alive and doing a crime.
God, it's great.
The idea that you could just steal the security camera and then no one knows you were there. What a world.
I was like, well,
I honestly think about this a lot. I think about the fact, and I don't think about it for any nefarious reasons, but I just think 100 years ago, you could just kill someone, and as long as no one saw you, you're good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was very difficult to detect any evidence.
There's no forensics. There's no.
John Mulaney has a great bit about that where he's talking about, he's like, the invention of DNA has changed everything. He's like, back in the day, it's like, detective, we found a pool of the killer's blood. And he's like, gross. Now back to my hunch. And it's like, gross. It's like you just be like, unless you found them there committing the crime, you just be like, yeah, that's me.
Unless you find like a monogrammed handkerchief, you're screwed, right? There's nothing, a business card or anything like that. It was a time where you'd have to leave a calling card, right, for them to even try and gloat, because they had no idea who was doing any crimes.
There was the whole point of like claiming credit for crimes and stuff, just being like, this was our gang.
I just think it's like, wow, you could have just not liked someone and just killed them, and as long as they weren't like your partner, you weren't really going to be a suspect.
Or in Wild West days, you could just kill them in front of the whole town and it didn't matter.
As long as it was for the right reasons, you know? Unless, like, people saw you arguing in the street moments before the crime happened and stuff. If you could sneak around and just shoot people, man, I just think the amount of crime that must have gone on. Or maybe they didn't realize how good they had it. Not that they should have been doing crimes. They hang out in the foyer for 30 minutes just to make sure that the panic button wasn't pressed. The only panic button being behind the desk that Rick was at. But again, this was Paddy's day in Boston. The police were busy.
Yeah. They timed it
was a good
well,
time.
I'll give them that.
Yeah.
Perfect time for a heist. They entered the Dutch room first at 1:48, where they take the Storm of the Sea of Galilee, which is worth $100 million.
Well.
Yeah, I really, really love that painting. I think it's gorgeous.
It's pretty good, and you can't see it anymore. There's just nothing but an empty frame.
Yeah.
They also steal a lady and a gentleman in black, and to get them out of the frames, they smash the paintings on the ground to break the glass, then cut them out of the frames with box cutters.
So much respect shown to the priceless works of art.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
I would say pragmatism.
Why didn't they just use like the blunt end of the box cutter to break the glass? They had to smash it on the ground?
It's more metal that way.
Wow.
Yes, sounds like the kind of person who's been on a heist, Paula. You got something to hide? Possibly in a hidey hole in your house under the ground?
What? I don't know. In the murder room?
No one goes up there.
The murder room's haunted. There's no reason for anyone to go in there.
I've been spreading these lies about being haunted for years.
They'll never go in there. There's ghosts.
First episode, Death by Monsters, she's like, oh, and by the way, I have a murder room. It's haunted. You probably should never go up there.
The thing I didn't consider was that you might want to investigate the ghosts.
On this paranormal podcast. They remove a massive Rembrandt self-portrait, but don't even bother stealing it because it's frankly too big. So instead they take a tiny self-portrait, which is 2 by 2 inches, which is way easier to remove. They then take 2 other paintings and a Chinese coup, which is like a ritual vase, which is like a ritual vase. Vase?
American vases.
What are you, an American?
One of the paintings they take from that room is the Concert by Vermeer. Now, the thing about the Concert by Vermeer is that it's one of only 34 works attributed to Vermeer. And because of that, the Concert by Vermeer was estimated to be worth $250 million.
Yep.
It's a lot. It's a lot of money.
And it's most likely the most valuable object stolen in the world right now.
Yeah.
It's not the most valuable item ever stolen because, I mean, the Mona Lisa was stolen for like 2 years.
Yeah.
And the jury's out on the British Museum, let's face it.
Well, yeah, so how do we count all of that as stolen? We just happen to know where all of it is. Now, hear me out. Once, I was compared to a Vermeer painting.
I will say this, you have a pre-Raphaelite look to you.
It's the round face. And so does that increase my value of some sort, you know, that I am like a Vermeer painting?
I don't base your value on your looks, Paula. I appreciate you for your mind.
So you think I'm ugly?
Well, now, if I just said I value you for your looks, you'd have just said...
So you think I'm shallow?
I see I'm in a catch-22 situation, and Nick is staying mysteriously quiet during...
Nick was smart. It's like, I'm not even messing with them. I'm not touching this.
Well, I was trying to think of a joke about how I'm constantly compared to a Picasso because I look like a monster and I have weird misshapen boobs, but like
There is that joke. It's like you look like an oil painting. It's a shame the artist was Picasso. Yeah.
yeah, exactly right.
For me, it isn't a pre-Raphaelite artist. He's a Baroque artist. But I think you've got a slight pre-Raphaelite look to you. I'll say it.
Okay.
You look like you could be the Lady of Shalott. I could see you drowning in a lake.
Goodness.
They
First, you're putting up videos of me on the internet asleep, which I think will air after this. And now you are picturing me drowned.
No, Paula, I'm having a vision.
I need everyone to know, I think what we're experiencing right now are red flags.
There are flags, and they got a red hue to them.
If anyone in your life is saying these kinds of statements to you, I think you should question something.
We did discuss once, me and Paula discussed about just buying us all red flags for the podcast, and we can just put them up when someone says, no, we're not, no. It's like, oh, Nick's holding up a red flag. I'm going to change the topic straight away. So they tried to steal a big Napoleonic flag, but end up just taking the eagle thing from the top of it because the flag was ginormous.
You know what? These guys are not closers.
They're not closers.
No.
They quit so many things just because it got a little bit tough. You quit? Okay.
This is how you know they're not masterminds. One, they had 81 minutes to do it. And second one, they're like, take this flag. Ah, fuck it, let's just take the eagle off the top of the flag.
Yeah.
It's just like, there's so much of that. Just like, let's take this giant Rembrandt. Oh, fuck, let's take this tiny little Rembrandt. It's just like, it's so like, that's because they had 81 minutes to just walk around and just be like, should we take that? Nah, it's too hard. Should we take that?
You know what it reminds me of? You know those like game shows where it's like, and now for the last round, you get to run in this toy store and whatever you can put, it used to be like on Nickelodeon, whatever you can put in the cart, you get to keep. And I feel, but you're timed. And I kind of feel like that is what's happening here.
We had a show called Supermarket Sweep.
Supermarket Sweep was the best show. Oh.
What blows my mind mainly is that they only stole 13 things.
Yeah.
You'd think they'd steal so much more.
Just saying, if you're on Supermarket Sweep, grab hoses. Hoses were the real money maker in Supermarket Sweep. Fill up the whole cart with hoses. Hoses made stupid money in Supermarket Sweep.
Good to know.
It's true.
The other thing they steal is 5 sketches by Degas.
I do like Degas, even though he's, I think, a bit of a creeper. I think.
Oh, they were all creepers, let's be honest.
So he has too many voyeuristic, like, woman in the bath who doesn't realize I'm drawing her right now kind of pictures. I'm like,
He's like, man, I painted this for like months. How did she not notice?
I just put a hat on and made spooky noises and they thought I was a ghost.
I hid behind a coat rack just painting furiously.
That's the thing where the past they have it worse than us. I mean, if you want to be a creeper, you've got to do it over a prolonged period of time. Now you can just be a creeper very quickly.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The last thing that was stolen was Chez Tortone by Manet from the Blue Room.
Is it bad that I was like, is that like a frozen pizza joke? What's happening? And the last thing that was stolen was the frozen pizza in the break room toaster oven that those guys were heating up because they did have the munchies. But too bad for them. They're tied up in the basement.
I will guarantee there was a frozen pizza in that break room, but they did not steal it. Also, the Blue Room is not to be mistaken by the Red Room from The Haunting of Hill House or the Amber Room, which was stolen by the Nazis during World War II. And you better believe we will eventually have a show on the Amber Room. It's fascinating.
Interesting.
But we're talking about the blue room.
The sad, sad room. My room's blue.
I just watched a documentary on them. Fascinating.
Really?
Yeah, it's on Vice. It's on YouTube. It's actually real good.
So the thing is that the motion sensor in the Blue Room was never tripped during the heist. The only time it was triggered was when Rick Abbott was patrolling the room earlier that night.
He's in on it.
So the painting in the blue room is gone, but the motion detector did not go off when the heisters were there.
It didn't, but it did go off when Rick
Right.
was patrolling.
That sounds like the beginning of a mystery.
Ooh.
It's the end of the story, I would say, but perhaps the beginning of the mystery, which has actually lasted 30 years. What? But that's it, though. They check on the guards one more time before taking the VHS from the cameras. They take the data printouts from the sensors, that they don't actually take the hard drive that the information is stored on, which is why we know all the details about it. Then they move all the art to the side door at 2:40, and by 2:45 on the morning of the 18th, as Boston drank green beer, and 81 minutes after they knocked on the door for the first time, the two men left, having committed the biggest theft of all time.
Awesome.
And it only took 2 of them, not 11. So
Yeah.
That's true. What's funny is, though, I've done a lot of research into heists in general and art heists, and there's so many good stories. There's one story about these guys, they kind of go in, grab a piece of artwork, and then they try and escape, but they have the art on top of the car, and the guy's just got his hand on it on top of the car, and as they drive off, the art just flies off. They have to go back and grab it. And there's a story about these two guys who they perform what was one of the first ever armed robberies from a museum, because it's actually really uncommon, or used to be very, very uncommon, to steal art with guns. You just go in and
Interesting.
steal the art, like dressed as handymen or something, which is actually quite common to just dress as though you work there. You know, dress for the job
Makes
you want,
sense, yeah.
which is a thief.
it's true.
And what they would do, and these guys, well, I think it was in Boston, or it might have been in Worcester, Massachusetts, and they the whole area don't have anything valuable in a museum, because in the 1990s, it turns out Boston, for instance, was just the Wild West.
That's so interesting. Is that just because of the number of museums in Boston?
There's a reason for it, which I'll get into.
Okay.
Okay.
The thing is, as well, is that they kind of go to this bar after they've done the heist, and it's breaking news because it was an armed robbery. They shot this security guard and the hip who survived, because the person the security guard was talking to happened to be a nurse. Otherwise, he would have killed him.
Oh my gosh.
They saw this painting, and it made the news. And the first thing these two guys say at the bar, just a bar, probably like some kind of seedy underground bar, but regardless,
Yeah.
I mean, I imagine it was above ground, the bar, but you know what I mean. The first thing they say when it comes on the news was, "That was us."
Oh my gosh.
And moments later, they were arrested for it.
That's great.
Hi.
As far as this goes, though, the following morning, as the next shift of guards come in, it doesn't take long for them to notice that something was slightly amiss, so they go call the police. But it's not until the actual police search that that Ricky and Randy are found still tied up in the basement.
Embarrassing for them. Egg on their face.
Well, they were overpowered, but they thought they were being arrested as well, So I can totally appreciate it.
I honestly don't really blame them at all.
Yeah.
What I find really interesting is that they could have stolen anything they want, but they seem to know exactly what they were going in for, as though they were filling out a grocery list. Not to mention, if it was me doing the heist for someone else, and I don't get to keep any of these items, I would steal the petty cash from, like, the till, like the register, from the cafe. There had to be some money on the side. I would at least steal something. I'll say it now. I'd steal something for myself.
Get a little something for yourself.
Yeah.
Get a Rembrandt for yourself. Yeah.
But you're right. It does kind of feel like they were given a list of like, oh, I want this, and I want this, and I want this, and I want this.
But I would take something for myself that wasn't going to be one of the hottest stolen items on the planet of all time ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was sitting in my room at like 11:30.
This is a spooky story.
Heard lots of shit downstairs. Assumed it was my mom. Heard her walk up the stairs to my room. Stop. And I called out to her. She didn't say anything, and she walked back downstairs. I went down about half an hour later to find a piece of paper with the words, "You're lucky. I'm scared too," on it, and a whole bunch of stuff missing from the house. I called my mom, but she hadn't even arrived home yet. She was at a dinner with her friends. I called the cops and locked myself in the bathroom, but I think they left when I realised I was still home. Probably the most scared I've ever been when I was hiding in the bathroom.
I hate it.
Imagine that. You're in a house, you hear someone walk up the stairs, you call out to them. This has happened to me, though, something similar. There was no note that said, "You're lucky, I'm scared too." That's horrible. But it's happened to me where I've been at home and I've called out to someone because I was like, "Oh, that person's home." Then I've gone downstairs and gone, "Oh, that person is not home." That's definitely happened to me.
I hate that story.
Thank you. So, let's get into some theories and prime suspects, shall we? We shall!
Let's do it.
It's safe to say that anyone stealing this type of thing is not going to be the same person who's actually acquiring it. You have to assume that there is someone, somewhere, that's hired people to do the job.
Yeah.
That is unless you look first at Rick Abbott.
Nah.
I do think Rick Abbott could be in on it. I will say that
You
right.
think so?
Yeah, straight up, I think he was involved.
He's not too much LSD.
You think he just got a little like ahead of himself by stealing that one painting sooner?
Or maybe that was a way he could prove to the fake cops that the job was going to work.
He's the guy that let the thieves in, and he did some weird stuff that night as well, at the night of the heist. The thing is, before the heist as well, he was known to let his friends come into the museum so they could all drop LSD in the courtyard. That's something that's...
Just like,
Yeah. It's my favorite part of the whole story.
There's the fact that he opened and closed the door. The thieves came in earlier that night.
Yeah.
For no reason.
I'd say, is that part of the like normal like protocol? Like, and then you check outside the door.
It's not. I think he could have been looking outside to see if his accomplices were there and maybe to signal to them that this was going to work. Because he said that he always opened and closed that door. However, the sensor readouts contradict that.
Interesting.
He doesn't always open and close that door. Then there's the fact that he's the only one that went into the blue room that whole night. Assuming the sensors were still working the following day, which they were. And that's where the Cher Stiltini was stolen from. And not for nothing, it's actually not that uncommon for there to be a guy on the inside when doing a heist. Or at least someone on the inside that's been paid off to help by leaving leave a window unlatched or moving a camera by a couple inches. He, of course, denies everything. And the FBI deemed him and Randy, actually, to be too incompetent and foolish to be involved. Which has gotta hurt.
Yeah.
A little bit. You almost kind of like, hey, I could have done this.
The FBI's like, sorry, we don't suspect you because we think you're kind of dumb.
I don't want to do a heist, but I want people to think I'm capable at least of doing a heist.
Right?
Yes, right?
I want to be at least a suspect.
Come on.
Next, there's Whitty Bulger, the head of the Winter Hill gang at the time and full-on crime boss.
That's how I was like, the Mr. Bolger?
The reason it didn't take too long for Whitty's name to come up is because this happened on his turf. Apparently, he was just surprised someone had the guts to pull something like this off on his turf. He also has ties with the Boston police, meaning that uniforms wouldn't have been an issue, but it's Boston in the 1990s. A lot of criminal underground organizations had ties with the Boston police. Have you seen The Departed? Whitty also had ties to the IRA, and it's thought that the purposeful tripping of the fire alarms was a calling card of the IRA when doing this kind of job. And according to a Scotland Yard crime official, it's thought that Whitty's most likely would have given the art to the IRA, meaning they're somewhere in Ireland. To put Whitty Bulger into some type of context, he's what can only be described as an absolute bastard.
Yeah.
He was eventually charged with racketeering, 19 counts of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, extortion, conspiracy to commit extortion, as well as drug dealing and conspiracy to commit money laundering.
Jeez.
And when he was sentenced in 2013, 32 of those charges stuck.
Wow.
Yep.
He got
Checks out.
2 life sentences plus 5 years for good measure. And when he was transferred to Hazleton prison,
He broke out and escaped, busted out by a bunch of people wearing clown masks.
no, he was beaten to death within hours of his arrival.
Oh, oops.
Checks out.
He was 89 and in a wheelchair.
Oh my gosh. Why was he beaten to death? Because he was so mean to people?
He was a murderer and rampant crime boss. Yes, he was mean to people.
A little bit.
But why would other criminals care? Or did the prison guards beat him to death?
I will assume he was probably left in a room with other people he probably shouldn't have been left in a room with so that those people could do what they wanted to do to him. I will imagine.
I hate it.
That happens all the time in prison.
All the time.
What a terrible place.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is with Whitty is that the lead investigator, Anthony Moore, discounts him completely. Whereas there's a Dutch art investigator called Arthur Brand, who's like a self-styled art thief version of Indiana Jones, and a man who frankly has way too much confidence in his own opinion, I think. Anyway, he's got a history of finding lost art. He found some big old Nazi horses and a bunch of other things. He's pretty successful at finding art, but he said he'd bet his life on the art being in Ireland. So
Really? Okay.
while the lead investigator of the actual thing thinks that that's a dead end, there's other investigators who don't think it's a dead end. There's Brian McDevitt. It's another name that gets thrown around. He tried to rob the Hyde collection, once dressed up as a FedEx driver, and also had handcuffs and duct tape on him to do the job. I know what you're thinking. Pretty sexy.
Yep.
Don't you think that all these people maybe could have found another path in life if they had just discovered like cosplay?
Or just acting in general, yeah.
You know?
There's one story I heard of an art thief, and the guy was just essentially a kleptomaniac. He just couldn't stop stealing things.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Like, that's the thing with it being a list of things to, like a grocery list of things to collect. It's really rare for someone to go in and steal a piece of artwork that they want personally. But this guy
Yeah.
would just go in. He apparently stole this piece of art that he wanted, and when he got caught, he said, "I was just taking it home so I could sketch it, and I was going to bring it back."
Oh my gosh. Weird.
Awesome.
So this Brian McDevitt was also trying to steal Rembrandt. He was also a flag aficionado, and he looked quite a lot like the taller of the two thieves on the night.
Interesting.
He was questioned regarding the heist, but denied it and refused to take a polygraph, which doesn't mean he didn't do it. As we said before with polygraphs, it might just mean that he thinks he did it. Checkmate.
Okay.
Oh.
Well. For everyone at home who's just listening, Matthew just took his pen, stuck it in his mouth like a cigarette, like a badass, and then like pretended like he was like blowing smoke out. But it was just a pen. So it's his attempt at looking like he's like solved something or is cool, but it's not really coming across quite right.
I think we can call this case closed.
That is interesting. The flag thing I find very intriguing.
Brian McDevitt is not necessarily one of the key suspects anymore, I don't think, but I think it's so interesting that he tried to rob a museum. He tried to do it in a very similar way, and he tried to steal a similar painting, and he was known to like flags. So it's kind of one of those things where it's really quite similar, and he did not want to take a polygraph test, which I just think is interesting.
Yeah.
Next, there's Bobby Donati from the Patriarch crime family, who was a suspect, but that was because of another art thief, Miles Connor Jr., who told authorities about him when he was in jail. This Miles Connor claims that he was stealing the paintings in order to trade them for his own release, which isn't that far-fetched, as it's exactly what Connor had done to get reduced sentences in the past. Now, this is something really important to know about why art gets stolen. Stolen art is both priceless and worthless at the same time.
Yeah.
Because you can't sell it. The fact is, on the black market, stolen art is worth about 10 cents on the dollar. So, on the black market. So, if you got a painting that's stolen and is worth £100, you're going to get
Yeah, because you can't like display it anywhere because it's famous.
What it's used for isn't to display, it's used as collateral. So you can give it in trade for drugs, you can give it in trade for guns, but what it's most used for, more than ever, and why Boston had a lot of stolen art, is because it had a lot of gangs. And the thing that art is used for is reduced sentences.
That's so
There's
interesting.
a massive theory that the whole point of stealing all this artwork was just to be used as leverage later on if anyone got in trouble in the crime gang that it was stolen for.
But how does it reduce their sentence?
Because artwork is heritage and it's a good news story. It makes the police look good. It's really important to the community that artwork is returned.
So they basically go to the police chief or whatever and say, hey, we'll give you back this whatever, this Rembrandt or whatever, and get our boy out in 6 months instead of 5 years or some shit.
That's exactly what it's used for.
That's interesting. Okay.
That is why art is stolen 90% of the time.
Fucking criminals.
That's pretty wild. Yeah, that's pretty wild.
So this whole story with Bobby Donati and the fact that this Miles Connor Jr. told the authorities about him all gets a bit squiffy, which is a word I think I've made up. When Connor told investigators that he'd be happy to help in the returning of the art if he could keep the reward money and get out of jail. Needless to say, the police didn't bite. So they tell him to talk to the art dealer and criminal William Youngworth. I will mention now that in some of the interviews with Youngworth, he looks and talks like the guiltiest person I've ever seen. And I've seen videos of owners confronting their dogs next to a fully destroyed couch. One thing that's really interesting about this whole thing is that because of the statutes of limitations and all this kind of stuff, loads of people take credit for stealing stuff.
Yeah.
Loads of people take credit when the statute's up because it's an art heist and it's cool. And Youngworth just seems to be the kind of person who wants to have that, who wants to use it as leverage. So people take him seriously or not. He's definitely a criminal, but he's like, yeah, I could tell you where they are, but I won't. And it's like a power move by a lot of these people, I feel. So essentially, the FBI go after Youngsworth. They raid his house. But after a run-in 1907 with Tom Mashberg, who's a journalist, Youngworth and therefore Bobby Donati's involvement become to completely fall flat because Youngworth showed this journalist one of the stolen paintings. It was rolled up, but which would be pretty much impossible to do because the actual paintings without destroying them, as well as when he supplied the investigation with chippings of paint to prove he had the paintings while being from the right era. they weren't from the stolen paintings.
That's interesting.
Which is just interesting that they can find that they know
Yeah.
which painting it's from.
It's awesome.
Yeah, gosh.
50 years before that, you could literally kill someone in the street in cold blood, and as long as no one saw you do it. And now they know which fleck of painting.
Probably know way more now. This is a while ago. At this point, it's like, God, man. Forensic has gotten real good.
But then, in 2014, another journo got tipped off after trying to contact Donati's superior, a guy called Vincent Ferreira. And apparently, after an associate of Ferreira's got back to him, he said that Donati did the heist to free him, his superior, Vincent Ferreira. And he buried the artwork for safekeeping. And that would be a problem because the reason those negotiations never actually happened with Donati was because Donati was murdered in September of 91.
Oh.
I will say now, what makes a lot of these things dead ends is because almost everyone involved gets murdered in the 90s.
It's that mob life.
Honestly, the people involved with this are serious criminals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like real,
serious
like
criminals.
bad dudes.
And there's a guy who was hitchhiking home when a big rig pulls up to the side of the road. The rig takes him a few miles down the road before telling him that this is as far as he goes. And he gives the hitchhiker some money for coffee and tells him to buy a coffee and tell him that Big Joe had hooked him up. When he orders the coffee in the little diner, he pulls out the money and says what he was told to say. He says, "Look, Big Joe set me up. Can I get a coffee?" And the waitress smiles and tells the hitchhiker that this happens from time to time. That the big rig is called Phantom 309.
I'd say, is this a song? Are these song lyrics?
Big Joe died in a wreck avoiding a school bus of children, but every now and again, someone comes in telling him that Big Joe had given a ride. Phantom 309 by Red Sovereigns. Fantastic song. Bit spooky. Anyway,
At least that one won't give me a nightmare later.
when we're talking about bad guys, it's difficult to find anyone really more dangerous than the Molino gang. In 2013, the FBI pretty much said that they think the Molino gang, or at least people involved and associated with the Molino gang, who, I'll say it now, do sound like they could be Italian wizards.
Yeah.
Which I was very pleased with when I noticed that and wrote it into the script.
I just perfected the spell. It makes my mama's pizza pie the best, you know?
That's it. That's exactly where I was going with that joke.
It's all based around my grandmother's recipes. It's me, the wizard, you know?
So the FBI think that the art was taken to Connecticut. and then
You're
on to
a pasta
Philadelphia.
maker, Harry. What? Keep going. I'm done.
So they think that the Molino family stole the art, took it to Philadelphia, and tried to sell it. They think that both the actual thieves are dead, and they being one George Reisfelder and Lenny DiMuzio, and they do actually match up really well with the police sketches that were made the night of the heist. Robert Gorente, who was associated with the Molinos, his widow told the FBI that her husband had owned some of the paintings, but when he got secret cancer, he gave them to Robert Gentile for safekeeping. But of course, Robert Gentile denies the whole thing, as you would.
Yeah.
You know, this is the thing, right? Gentile was had up for drug charges, but then failed the polygraph test in regards to questions about the paintings. But everyone knows about these paintings. Everyone was being
really,
questioned. These people probably all knew where the paintings were, or all knew someone who knew. So polygraph tests don't really say anything. And also,
Yeah.
firstly, Gentile says that he was probably being set up by the FBI, which he most likely was doing. The way that the Molino gang, I think, all got done, or was it? I can't remember if it was the Molino gang or if it was Witty Bulger, but they got done up in stings, and that's how a lot of them got caught. So the FBI were after them because they work. It's not paranoia when they're after you because you're a
Yeah.
criminal, right? You can be paranoid, but you've got the right to be so.
Yeah, totally.
And the thing is that everyone hates each other, probably. So maybe
Yeah,
Gentile and Gorente just absolutely hated each other. And when Gorente knew he was going to die, he said, well, I heard Gentile's got them. It's like, great, thanks.
Thanks, dude.
One less F you on my deathbed.
I'd do it.
Yeah, of course you do it. Who's not doing that? Also, give the police one last run around. That's probably,
Yeah.
that sounds fun, right?
Just, for old time's sake.
Gorente's widow, Eileen, was asked if she knew anything about the Gardner heist, and this was as an aside to the reason they were actually talking to her in the first place. But when she was asked, her hand started to shake, and after denying it, she breaks down, beginning to cry, and says, "My Bobby had 2 of those paintings."
Oh, that's interesting.
The FBI did find a secret hidey hole at Gentile's house, but it was empty, and Gentile's son said that Robert had been angry about what got destroyed down that hidey hole when it flooded. And they found a copy of the Boston Herald reporting on the heist, as well as papers detailing what the paintings would be worth if sold on the black market.
Suspicious. Well, they sound like this last person, this Bobby fella, might be the culprit. I also do like that flag collector, but this is pretty, a crying wife and a newspaper article and a anecdote about being angry about a basement flooding. I'm sold.
I think it probably was the Molinos. I think that is who the authorities think did it, essentially. They think that
But we've still never recovered any of them.
No, right?
Interesting.
Nothing's been recovered.
Gosh, this is such an interesting story.
And it's more interesting because nothing's been recovered. There's a $10 million reward.
Yeah.
That's how you make your money on it, I guess.
Yeah.
That's part and parcel of how to get money on an art heist. Is that one of the other reasons that art's stolen is kidnap. It's not being stolen. They're kidnapping the art.
Yeah. For ransom.
Yeah, that's the main other reason art is stolen, is to kidnap it and hold ransom, then sell it back.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is the hottest property. The Gardner paintings are some of the hottest property in the country, in the world. This is, you can't touch. But the thing is, as well, listening to Anthony Moore talk about it, it's fascinating because he's fairly certain that the artwork is still in Boston. It's probably still in New England, at least, because 90% of artwork stays in the local area because no one wants to transport it.
Right.
Yeah, like what are you supposed to do? Take it on a plane? Yeah.
Yeah, it's big. You can't roll it up. It's got to be climate controlled. It's got to be safe.
Yeah.
And the most likely thing is, and I totally mean this, if you know anyone who has been involved in anything shenanigan-wise in the Boston area, check your attic because that artwork could be in their house or your house. It really could because it's out there somewhere. I mean, it's probably behind drywall or in a hidey hole or in some kind of attic. There's one story about a guy who stole some art. I can't remember exactly all the details, but I think it was someone involved in this, a different art heist. And when they stole the art, the police came over for something completely different. And as they were having the conversation, the stolen art that he'd stolen was right above his head in an attic space. So the police were meters away from it. The fact is, and this is a point, there's a couple of points I really want to make about this art theft in general, is that even the people that work at this museum, and this is what Anthony Moore says, which is where I got this, it's like even the people that work in that museum probably don't all know exactly what those paintings look like. And even the people in Boston, if you get a person in Boston off the street, 9 out of 10 of those people aren't going to know what those paintings look like. Yet they're the most valuable stolen property in the world. And they're part of their heritage of the place. So you could have walked past that painting in your granddad's house 100 times and not known it's 100.
And not realized.
And not known it's worth $250 million.
You're just like, here's one of those like weird IKEA prints or something.
Totally.
They say one of the worst things is they can almost guarantee the police have probably seen those pieces of art when they've done a raid for something completely different. If they're in the Boston area and they're still in some kind of like gangster's house, the police have probably gone in there and seen the paintings and not thought twice about them. Thought this guy's got some paintings. It's fascinating.
That's so interesting.
Especially because, like, if they are wealthy mobsters, they probably do have, like, nice paintings. You can buy, Picassos and stuff. It's just like, it's one of the things, like, it's totally possible that they do just have really nice paintings that they have purchased with, of course, stolen money or whatever. But yeah, I really like this story. I love the fact that it's seemingly so tied to, like, the crime families and the mob because it's just so many theories over who it could be, and the real thing is it could literally have been any of them, and it would totally make sense.
Yeah, any of them and all of them.
Yeah, I love it. It's just like, oh no, it was Bobby Two Shoes, and he's just like, hey man, it was Jimmy the Elm, and it's just, I just love this weird, people constantly they keep having to go from person to person. There's so many people that this has been kind of loosely tied to, and that's honestly probably great for whoever stole it, because they could just, again, there's so many entities in this area that could have pulled this off easily and had reasons to, because this is the kind of thing that happens all the fucking time. It's like, it's just so fascinating, the constant runarounds that's happening with the whole thing, you know?
And the fact that everyone probably hates each other, everyone wants to set each other up.
Because they're all different crime families, yeah.
I don't think these are hanging up in anyone's house. I think they are probably hidden away. I don't think that many people are that brazen with it, because why do that?
Yeah.
But yeah, they're in someone's house. I think they're in someone's house, and I think they're in Boston. But the thing is as well is that, and I came into this whole thing thinking this way and left thinking another way, which is, nice when that happens.
Yeah.
I always think of art theft as just affecting rich people who've got too much money and too much art and stuff, and too much in life. I think of art as just things people start buying when they have run out of things to buy a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I need something to put in my yacht now, so I'm going to start buying art. What can I spend this money on? I've got all the money in the world, right? But when it's in a museum, I really do think, and the way it was described, I think Paula will relate to, I think you'll both relate to this quite well, because Nick's an actual artist, is that when you steal art, you're stealing culture, and you're stealing heritage, and you're stealing from everyone.
Yep.
No one gets to see those pieces of art anymore, and they're gone, and you don't get to see them.
Yeah.
And the way it's been described by one of the people I think the woman who runs the Gardner Museum now, I think it was the person who described it this way, and she said, imagine Hamlet getting stolen. And from now on, every production of Hamlet's gone. All that's left of Hamlet is people's memory of Hamlet, but no one will ever be able to watch it performed. No one will ever be able to read it again.
That's such an interesting analogy.
And that's exactly what it's like when you steal a painting. You're stealing it from everyone. A reproduction is never going to be like seeing it for the real time. I remember the feeling. I was in the museum with Paula and Karen, Mike's fiance. The feeling that hits you when you see a painting that you love.
It's an emotional experience that is like hard to describe.
And taking that away from people. I know if someone stole my favorite paintings, I'd be devastated about it. I really would be. I would hate that I never get to go see that painting again. It's not just art; it's culture, and it's like a culture of and just. I think stealing art it's a terrible crime against the museum, but they've got money and they've got other artworks and they've got insurance and they've got benefactors and all this kind of stuff. But what you're doing is you're stealing it from people and their ability to see it. I feel very much the same way about all the art that's in back rooms that no one ever gets to see. And I appreciate there's only so much space in the world, right?
Yeah.
But I just think it's fascinating. And I got so deep into looking at heists and finding out different heists.
So you're ready to plan your own now.
Boom.
But I would have to do it for the right reasons. I'd have to do a heist on the moral high ground.
Speaking of stealing art, if you want to feel like you aren't stealing the art that is this podcast, we have a Patreon. No, so for real, obviously this podcast is free and it will remain free for everyone. And we mostly just appreciate your listen and you spreading the word about the show to people you think might enjoy it. But if you want to go above and beyond and support the podcast with your dollars, you can do that. Patreon.com/deathbymonsters. Check it out. There's some fun stuff there. There's perks. There's a little bit of behind the scenes info. There's the ability to vote on whether or not Stay Spooky will be a catchphrase of the podcast. And there's also a bonus show there that Matthew and Michael Lee Murphy do once a month that is free for all. Everyone can listen to it, but it is made possible because of our Patreon supporters who that amount of financial support allows Matthew and Mike to have the time to record this extra bonus podcast for everyone. So check that out. Just thought I'd throw that little plug in right there.
Really, honestly, the best way to support us is to tell someone else about the show. If you like the show, if you know someone else who might enjoy the show, or if you see someone asking for podcast recommendations on Facebook or Reddit or whatever, please throw our name into the bunch if you think they would enjoy it. Please make sure to check out our website, deathbymonsters.com, I believe. And that'll have links to all of our social media. We're on social media posting cool, fun stuff. It'll also have a link to our merch store where you can check out some merch. There should be some new merch up there. More coming soon. We want to have Hypno Pumpkins merch, I think, is one of the next things to have. If you have a home strange story, every other week we do a story from people at home. Please make sure to send it to us at deathbymonsterspodcast@gmail.com. Anything spooky happened to you, anything spooky happened to someone you know, you saw an alien, you saw a cool dog, and you pet it. Tell us about that too, because that'd be cool.
Also, if you have any ideas for any actual full Death by Monsters episodes, feel free to send those ideas in. Hey, and also send in some reference material so I can get a head start on the research.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'll say
You
it.
want to see a specific cryptid talked about, a specific mystery or whatever? Yeah, send it in. Absolutely. Also, please make sure to join our Facebook group. It's one of the coolest Facebook groups out there. People are always posting weird, cool stuff.
Yep.
And
It
it's
is
just
out there,
overall-
let's put it that way.
It is a bit out
Yeah.
there.
It's a bit out there. It's real weird, and I love it.
One last thing, speaking again, not to mention our Patreon 3 different times in 3 different places, but I do want to give a quick shout out to one of our patrons who supports the show, and that is Stuart McConnell. Stuart, thank you so much for supporting the show, for being willing to part with your hard-earned dollars to help us continue to do even more fun, strange, mysterious, spooky things. We just really appreciate you. So thank you, Stuart.
Yeah. Thank you, Stuart.
Seriously, thanks. That's amazing.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Like, genuinely, thank you so
We
much.
say it's like it's nothing. It's like, no, thank you. That's
No,
incredible.
like, very genuinely, yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, I think that's it. Have a wonderful rest of your day or evening or when the hell you listen to this, fam, and stay spooky, right?
Oh, gosh.
That's the thing?
Stay spooky, everyone. Bye.
Bye.